Chip Ganassi Racing and Cadillac have had a successful relationship in Imsa dating back to 2021. Since then, the pair have racked up 6 wins and worked together to develop Cadillac's LMDH car, the V-Series R. However, the two are set to part ways at the end of the 2024 season, and the surprise news leaves us with more questions than answers. Today, Cadillac is a common name in the prototype racing scene, but it hasn't always been that way. After making a splash at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1950 with a car called Le Monstre, impeccable pronunciation, I know. They wouldn't return to sports car racing though until 2000 with the Cadillac North Star LMP, which would also run selected races in the then American Le Mans series. The North Star project though would also be short-lived, as GM shut down the project at the end of the 2002 season in order to focus on the Corvette project, which I don't think you can argue against the success they've had there. And while Cadillac would run in various forms of GT racing in the years since, it wasn't until 2017 when they would return to prototype racing with the Cadillac DPI VR. Competing in Imsa's DPI class, this car would go on to be arguably the most successful car of the era. Along the way, it amassed 27 wins across 57 races, and among those wins, the car crossed the line first in all 4 of the Endurance Cup races, as well as capturing 3 teams championships. One of the teams that operated this car over its 6-year history in Imsa was Chip Ganassi Racing. Fresh off their Ford GT campaign, Chip Ganassi Racing came on board to run 1 Cadillac in 2021 before expanding to 2 cars for the 2022 season. Now, of course, 2022 was the last year of the DPI regulations before the brand new LMDH regulations would be brought in for the 2023 season. As part of the preparation for these LMDH regulations, Chip Ganassi Racing played an integral role in developing Cadillac's V-Series R for LMDH competition along with Action Express Racing. That brand new V-Series R would go on to pick up 2 wins in its first year of IMSA competition and included a championship for the Action Express Racing entry. Now, this is not supposed to be a video about what Cadillac's past history in motorsports has been, rather it's supposed to be about what their IMSA future might look like. And right now, there are certainly some question marks around that. Now don't worry, Cadillac isn't going anywhere on the IMSA grid, but in the lead up to the 12 Hours of Sebring, it was announced that Cadillac and Chip Ganassi Racing would part ways at the end of the 2024 season, ending their 4-year relationship. This news was quite surprising, and really it left us with more questions than answers. Now frankly, we're probably not going to get very many answers to these questions until later into the 2024 season when Chip Ganassi Racing and Cadillac formally announce what their 2025 plans are. But until then, there's a few things worth talking about. First, what does Chip Ganassi Racing do next? In addition to running single entries in both IMSA and the WEC, Chip Ganassi Racing has a heavy presence on the IndyCar grid with 5 entries. Now, one thing that I will say here is that I hope that many of the employees who are affected by this news are able to land with the IndyCar operation in one form or another, because really there aren't that many other options within Chip Ganassi Racing right now. They've been reducing their motorsport footprint in recent years. In 2021 they sold their NASCAR operation, and at the end of 2023 it was announced that they would not be returning to Extreme E. Certainly, hopefully this won't be the last that we hear of them in sports car racing, and there are probably a couple of paths that they could take to stay on the IMSA grid in one form or another for next year. Perhaps we could see a return to Ford and running Fords in one form or another in one of the GTD classes. After all, they partnered with Ford for many years. Or perhaps they would make a great partner for a new manufacturer that's looking to come into IMSA, maybe not even next year, maybe a couple of years down the road. They're looking for an experienced team to help introduce them to the championship. I think it's a pretty obvious question, and the first thing that came into my mind when I heard this news is, why end a partnership like this? Cadillac and Chip Ganassi Racing have seemed to be doing pretty well together for the past few years. Now, I think it's too simple to just point purely at performance, but I also think it's realistic for that to have played a factor. In 2024, the 01 Chip Ganassi Racing entry was outperformed by the 31 Action Express Racing Cadillac over the course of the season. Now, the 01's sole bright spot came at Laguna Seca, where it pulled out a win, but otherwise their season was littered with bad luck, whether it be in the form of mechanical issues or crashes. At the end of the day though, I don't think this was purely a performance related issue. I think this is mostly a business decision. Of course, something that's pretty obvious to think about would be money. I mean, this is a business after all, and if the two sides couldn't agree on a number, then that would of course cause an issue. But also, put yourself in GM's shoes here for a moment. In Imsa, you are now the last manufacturer to have their factory team operate under two different banners, Chip Ganassi Racing and Action Express Racing. Acura now has both cars under the Wayne Taylor Racing with Andretti banner, BMW is of course with RLL, and then Porsche have their two factory cars run by Penske. There are clear benefits of operating both of these cars under the same roof, whether it be things like data sharing or testing. There are so many things that can be made more efficient by having both of these cars operate under the same banner. Which leads to who the obvious candidate is to assume the second entry on the Imsa grid, Action Express Racing. Action Express Racing have of course been with Cadillac since they entered the DPI class in 2017, and along the way they've amassed 10 wins and 3 championships together. In a Racer article by Marshall Pruitt, which I'll put a link to in the description, he says that multiple of his sources are indicating that it's quite likely we'll see Action Express Racing running that second car in Imsa next year. But let's have a little bit of fun with this for a second and explore some alternate options to run that second Cadillac. The first less realistic option that I've thought of is Trackhouse Racing. The team purchased Chip Ganassi Racing's NASCAR operations in 2021 and has since expanded to include a MotoGP team. On top of that, co-owner Justin Marks raced in Imsa for parts of 4 seasons, and it's not a stretch to think that he could also be interested in expanding that team to Imsa. However, the other and more realistic option that I see as a possibility is Hendrick Motorsports. The NASCAR team has seen involvement in sports car racing in recent years. Of course, the team spearheaded the Garage 56 entry last year, which attracted a ton of attention at Le Mans. And before that, they actually partnered with Action Express Racing to run a second DPI entry in the 4 Michelin Endurance Cup races for the 2021 and 2022 seasons. In the LMDH era, the two weren't able to continue their partnership, but I do think this is something that it would make sense for the two teams to partner up on again in 2025. For this scenario to unfold, I think it would make a lot of sense for this to be a partnership similar to what they ran a couple of seasons ago. The other reason that I think this could have a slim possibility of happening is Hendrick Motorsports team owner Rick Hendrick and how he has expressed interest in potentially expanding their involvement in sports car racing. He certainly hasn't ruled it out, and for that reason I think this has a little bit more legitimacy to me just spitballing some crazy idea. However though, what do you think? Do you think that Hendrick Motorsports could return to Imsa in a larger capacity, or do you think this is a slam dunk second Action Express Racing entry with no outside involvement? Let me know down in the comments. In other Sebring news, Imsa released their 2025 schedule. And yes, there are some notable omissions from it. I run through everything you need to know right here. Huge shout out to all of the channel supporters. If you too want to support the show, you can head to patreon.com/offinthes or click the join button below. With that though, thanks for tuning in. I hope everyone has a great race weekend and doesn't go off in the S's.